Okay. So today we are talking about the sacrament of marriage. And the truth is that good marriages take time. But it's even more true that bad marriages take more time. So I figure, why not put some time into your relationships and have more time for yourself? What have you got to lose? Obviously, not all of us are married. Some of us are very happy not being married. And I completely agree that it's a lot better to be on your own than to be in a painful, difficult relationship. That's just much better to be on your own than to be in that situation. And the wonderful thing is that nowadays nobody needs to get married like they did in the past, how women did in the past, for fiscal and support and social status. So I think that's great. So all that to say, if you're not married, good for you. You don't need to be. And I hope this sermon still has something for you. For a marriage is really just like any other relationship, and it can always be improved, and there are loving and scientific ways to do that. So hopefully you can apply what I have to say today to any of your relationships that you have. Am I an expert on marriage? Not a chance. I come to you very humbly today, saying that marriage is not always easy, and but it's worth it. So I have managed to stay married for 37 years. Whoa! And to the same person too. Hasn't been that hard, truthfully, and why is that? Well, first off, I married a Catholic. They are notoriously difficult to get rid of. They are very tenacious in relationships, especially with relationships with children. Secondly, both my husband and I had an understanding from the beginning that we were going to make the relationship work, because neither of us had big problems with addictions or severe trauma in our past. Making it work wasn't that hard. And did you notice I said big problems with addictions? I believe all of us have addictions to some level or the other. I certainly have trouble with using food for comfort. That's one of my addictions. Anyway, I still remember the time right after we got married, and we'd had this big disagreement, and I thought to myself, I'm going to break up with him. And then I remembered I was married. I thought, I can't just break up with people anymore. So I thought, well, we're going to have to figure this out sooner or later, so we might as well figure it out sooner than later. And that's what we've done pretty much for our entire marriage. And if we are having a disagreement, as soon as our emotions settle down enough, we just get on with trying to resolve it. We figure we're going to have to resolve it eventually, and it takes so much effort, at least it does for me, to be in a state of conflict with my husband, that I think let's just get this over sooner than later. I know one time we were driving somewhere, and something had happened between us, and I was very upset. But then my husband said something really funny, so I didn't want to laugh, because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing that what he said was funny. So he just says to me, darling, go ahead and laugh. I know you want to. I know you're still very angry at me. I just learned the most brilliant prayer for people you're annoyed with. And this is it. Bless them, change me. Bless them, change me. If you remember nothing else from this sermon, please try and remember that. Bless them, change me. Let's practice for a second. I'll give you like 1 minute, and you can pray. First, start out with someone that you like, okay, and that you're getting along well with, and then switch to someone that you're having a bit more trouble with, okay? So I'm just giving you like 30 seconds to work on that. hope that was helpful for you. Okay. What's that? Okay. Sorry, that's okay. My sister gave me permission to share this next bit. She married an alcoholic. Of course, she didn't know that when she got married to him, but he was an alcoholic. And she tried a lot of things to try and change his behavior. That behavior that was subjectively hurtful, bad behavior, and none of it worked. She wasn't a Christian at the time, and in desperation, she finally became a Christian because she couldn't think of anything else left to do. So did that straighten him out? No. Didn't work. Worked on her, but didn't work on him. Not at least till he decided to let God help him. And he has been sober for 30 years now. Yeah. It's an incredibly transformed person. If you meet him, it's great. So anyway, she went to a counselor and she explained the situation, and the counselor agreed with her. His problem was a big behavior. So when my sister asked the counselor what she should do, the counselor replied, "Change yourself." Isn't that ridiculous? She wasn't the problem, but she was the only problem in the situation that she had any control over. So that's what she set out to do, not because it's what she wanted to do, but because she tried everything else and nothing else had worked. My sister said it was even more difficult at the time because when she went to church and stuff like that, people would take her aside and say, "That husband of yours, I know it's hard to be with him sometimes. We really admire how loving you are towards your husband." And she said it was pretty easy for her to feel pretty good about how she was dealing with this situation and think, well, the problem's him, not me. But that's the only thing that she could do, was to work on changing herself. I think I told you a couple summers ago, I was struggling with an ongoing issue in my relationship with my husband. So I made a rather expensive appointment with a lady I go to marriage counseling for. I was actually a bit put out by the amount of money that it cost. But then my sister said to me, "Pamela, what would you rather have, a good marriage or a nice car?" And I thought, okay. And it's true. Like, put your money where your mouth is, you know? So I go to the appointment and my therapist asks, "Okay, what's the problem?" And I say, "Oh, that's easy, it's my husband." And she says, "Okay, what can you do about his behavior?" Nothing. So she says to me, "Well, let's see what we can do about your behavior." What I'm not going to talk about today is divorce. I have no experience with it. And from what I've observed, divorce seems to be even more painful than losing a partner to death sometimes. And for those of you who have gone through the process of divorce, I stand with you and I hurt with you. In preparation for this talk, I did talk to a number of people I know who have been divorced, and I asked them, why do you think it happened? Like, what happened? Why did the marriage break up? And at least one of the people said to me, "I had a broken chooser. Like, I didn't make good choices about who I was marrying. I had this idea about the ideal Christian woman in marriage, and I met this person, and I thought it just, like, everybody was for it, and everybody seemed to meet everybody else's expectations." She said that she actually had a lot of red flags herself about the relationship, but she ignored them because everyone else around her thought it was good, and she had never been taught to listen to her own inner voice, you know? Like, she was always expected to listen to elders' voices or people around her. And so she ignored those red flags to her peril. I talked to another guy who's been married and divorced 3 times. And he said to me, "You know what I've realized after being married to 3 different people is that you're always going to have irreconcilable problems within your marriage. Like, you just are. And so if you divorce somebody and marry somebody else, you just get different irreconcilable differences. He said to me, so tell people if they're thinking of trading in their current spouse for a new model, you won't have those problems anymore, but you just get new ones anyway. So why not stick with the person you're with if you can? In my preparatory reading for this talk, I came across a great book on marriage called The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work by John Gottman. He has an institute down in Seattle. And I think it's well worth reading because it's based on a lot of scientific research he did, and it's so practical. What he did was, he said in the past that therapists had tried to look at relationships that had gone poorly and figure out what went wrong. He thought, well, why don't I look at marriages where people are actually happy being married and see what they do to have good relationships. So that's what the book is about. He interviewed and spent tons of time with about 1,500 different couples to try and figure out what it was that made their relationships good. And so one of the facts that he put forth, according to his research, that approximately 69% of most marital arguments cannot be resolved. Couples spend year after year trying to change each other's minds. I've certainly done it, but it can't be done. This is because most of their disagreements are rooted in fundamental differences of lifestyle, personality, or values, and fighting over those differences, well, all you do is succeed in wasting time and harming your marriage. So instead, they need to understand what's the bottom line conflict here, like what are we actually arguing about, and then understand that it's not going to change for your partner, and you need to work out a way to respect that and try and work something out that both of your needs are met, somewhat, anyway, but stop trying to change your partner. And the truth is, there is no absolute reality in marital conflict. There's only 2 subjective opinions. No one is right. No one is right. Well, blow me down smoky. I wish someone had told me that when we first got married. I spent a lot of time over the last 37 years trying to get my husband Paul to see the light and do things my way. And it hasn't worked. It would have been so much better if I had come to terms with the fact that we're just going to disagree on some of these subjects all the time, and we could work out some resolution that, like I said, would meet one another's needs, but still respect the differences between us. Gottman, the guy who wrote the book, gave some examples of irreconcilable and solvable differences. So I'm going to read you out a few little scenarios that are just a couple sentences long. And so when you listen to them, there's 3 of them. Each of them he describes is this a solvable problem in a marriage, or is this a perpetual problem that you're just going to have to work out some terms on? Okay, so I'll read out 3. You figure out what the answers are. Okay. Cliff and Lynn agree that it's Cliff's job to take out the kitchen trash every evening after dinner. But lately he's been so distracted by a big deadline looming at work that he forgets. Either Lynn ends up throwing out the garbage herself, or the trash just sits there, and by morning the apartment smells like a garbage dump, and Lynn is in a rage. What do you think? Is this problem solvable? Don't say it out loud, just think it in your head. Is this problem solvable or perpetual? That's number 1. Number 2. Elise wants to spend less time with Joel and more time with her friends. Joel says this makes him feel abandoned. Elise says that she needs some time away from him. He seems very needy to her, and she's feeling suffocated by him. Is that solvable or perpetual? And the last one. Jim wants Thea to be more organized. He doesn't like that the house rarely gets cleaned unless he attends to it, and the kids often don't get to school on time. She thinks he acts smug and superior to her and gives her the sense that the disorganization in their house is due to a character flaw that she has. She feels attacked and gets defensive every time he raises a subject. She says their house is supposed to be a home, not an army barracks, and that he needs to relax about these issues because his demands are unreasonable. And they have been arguing about this for years. Is that a perpetual problem or a solvable problem? Okay, here we go. Number one, the thing with the garbage and Lynn and Cliff not taking out the garbage. What do people think? Solvable. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he's just having a hard time right now. And yeah. How about number two, with Elise wanting to go and spend more time with her friends, with Joel? What do you think? I'm not grading you. Pardon me? I think that one's probably actually more perpetual because it's based in their personalities. You know, that she's much more extroverted than he is. So they have to work on a solution that respects both of that. Thanks for being willing to answer. And the third one, what do you think about that? Solvable or perpetual? Perpetual. Yeah, that's right. That's a real difference in understanding of how tidy and clean things should be at home. I'm sure none of you have ever had a problem with that. Okay, another idea that John Gottman had in his book is using a love map to intentionally understand deeply what is important to your partner or your friends. So I'm going to hand one right out. I'm going to hand a love map out right now because I'm a teacher and I like handing things out. And you can look it over and I'll give you like 3 minutes to do it if you want. If you don't want to, you could just write a shopping list on the paper or write down your life goals. I don't know. But here we go. Okay, I'm going to ask you if you could just fold that up and put that in your pocket right now and finish off later. And if you want to mark yourself, the scoring's on the back. Mary Oliver says that attention without feeling is just a report. So you can ask your spouse or your friends all these questions to find out the answer, but if you don't respond with any feeling, you're just giving them a report. So for me, marriage has been the single most transformative relationship besides Jesus in my life. And why is that? Because my husband was the first person to really believe in me, who wanted to know who I was, who actively worked to help me discover and bring about my dreams. It hasn't always been easy, but it's always been worthwhile. One winter, about 4 years ago now, our son Ian started planning an overnight trip for the family on to climb Mount Baker the coming June 2019, I should say. So he was over at our house and he started describing the trip to me, and I pretended I was going to come. I could see he was horrified at the thought of trying to drag me up Mount Baker, but he was too kind to say so. So then he went into an explanation of how dangerous it was, and that you had to wear ice crampons, and you had to have an ice axe to stop you when you were sliding down so you don't fall off cliffs, and how you had to be tied up on a rope to 3 other people, so if you fell into a crevasse, they could pull you out before you froze to death. So he's telling me all this stuff, and I let him go on about the dangers for a moment, but then I just couldn't bear to let him suffer anymore. And so I told him I wasn't planning to come, and he was like, oh, okay. I said, I have to work. He's like, oh yeah, you have to work. That's right, Mom, you can't come on a Sunday. But really, marriage is like being roped up to someone on a mountain. If you're in trouble, you've already got someone you're roped up to help you out. They are stuck with you, and that is a good thing. You've got someone to rely on in bad times and someone to laugh with in good times. So the last question I'd like to address is, how do you become the best partner, best friend ever? Okay, you're going to love this idea. By failing at it. How do you become more loving? By failing at it. Some of you might read Richard Rohr's daily devotionals, and he was talking about that this past week. He says, for example, we don't become more charitable by willpower, by saying to ourselves, be charitable. Instead, we recognize the moments when we were totally uncharitable, and we weep over them. Well, that doesn't sound like much fun, does it? Who wants to go there? I mean, talk of growth and achievement and climbing and improvement and progress highly appeals to our egos. But the only way we stay on the path of learning to love one another deeply with any authenticity is to constantly experience our incapacity to do so, our failure at doing it. It's the contrast. It's recognizing what's going on. And he said for him, every day it's like recognizing that, Richard, you don't know how to love at all. And he said that's what keeps him on the path of love. Constant failure at loving is ironically and paradoxically what keeps us learning how to love. You know, when someone comes to me in a spiritual mentoring situation and says to me, I feel terrible, I just realized that I have been unintentionally embarrassing my partner by talking about how junky our car is all the time. And, well, I'm delighted to hear things like that. I say, congratulations, you're 80% towards, you've done 80% of the work for solving the problem. Because the majority of the work with things that are going on for you is just recognizing your responsibility in it. And once you do that, once you recognize that you've been inadvertently embarrassing your spouse, you don't want to do that anymore. And the desire to do those things just drops away. You learn to love by failing at it again and again and desiring to do better. Admittedly, like I said, it's not very gratifying for your ego, but it works. Rohr goes on to say, this is the genius of what St. Paul calls the folly of the cross that he mentions in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. That doesn't give us the satisfaction that our egos want. That we're always recognizing that we are failing at love. So when you're trying all these different things, like, I don't know, I can't look at myself and know if I'm growing spiritually or in love towards my husband. And, I don't know if I'm deepening my relationship with Jesus, as Christians love to say. I hope I am. But any smug satisfaction on my part is not going to do me or Jesus or my partner any good. But every day, knowing that I have not yet begun to love others, to love Jesus, Rohr says that is the constant experience of littleness, is called the Franciscan way. He's a Franciscan monk. And it works. It really works. So may God bless all of you as we strive to fail less at loving those around us. And that God can bring up within us to change us and bless others. Okay, just in case your mom asked you at lunchtime what the sermon was about, I'm just going to reiterate the 3 things real fast. Number 1, try the prayer. Bless them, change me. Number 2, recognize that many of the problems that you have in your relationships are perpetual and you're not going to be able to resolve them, so just work it a way that you can both live with it like that. And third of all, we learn to love by failing at it. Amen.